Morning, everyone. Welcome to this panel conversation session. It's a hybrid session, so I think we may hopefully have some folks joining online as well. It's going to be a discussion with our wonderful panelists up here, who I'll introduce briefly in a moment. You're welcome, particularly those joining us online, are welcome to pose questions as they come to mind through the session. Through the app, or otherwise make a note in the room if you're here in the room, and we can address those questions towards the end of the session. So today I've been really looking forward to this. So I'm grateful to be here with these esteemed colleagues. Today's going to be about the practice of everyday leadership. So, you know, we often think of leadership in terms of formal roles, particularly perhaps in a political domain. But I think we're going to be have some more illuminating discussions around being a leader in a perhaps less formal sense and being an agent of change. And so we've got some wonderful folks here joining us. It's sure to be a great discussion. The discussion will be facilitated by on the end there by Marty Grundy, who's a senior research fellow at the Centre for Human Security and Social Change at La Trobe University. And she's a monitoring, evaluation and learning specialist over about 15 years. Her passion is in giving people space to or a chance to share their voice and their ideas, which is precisely what she'll be doing with the panellists, all of whom are alumni of Australia Awards Women Leading and Influencing program. And so there's particularly a leadership development program that scholars can join. And these folks have been participants in that, and they're going to share some of their insights from that, I believe, and also more broadly in their profession and community lives. So here on the end, we have Irene, who's joining us as a national of Papua New Guinea. I was born in Papua New Guinea. I always feel a real sense of connection with that place whenever I go back. Sometimes I wish I was a citizen myself, just quietly. She's joining us as a postdoc research fellow at the University of Queensland. Then we have in the middle, we have Aloisi, who's from Fiji, and she's also an alumni and a PhD candidate from UQ as well. And then Luan on the end there, who's a fellow alumni from Papua New Guinea. She's a manager of ICT and broadcasting with FM 100, so a media star, I believe. Thanks for joining us. So here today speaking about leaders, I guess I'm mindful that we're meeting where leaders have met for countless generations on the Gadigal lands of the Eora Nation. So I'd like to give respect to those leaders, past and including present, and those who are coming in or emerging in the future as well. The customs of meeting on these very lands have lessons we can draw from today as we try to be change agents or leaders in the world. My own connection with these lands is, I'm Paul Crawford, by the way, sorry. My own connection with these lands is, you may recall back in the quaint old days, the UN summit in Rio, the UN Sustainability Summit in 1992, led to a great wave of enthusiasm and optimism, particularly for development practitioners. And the University of Technology, Sydney, on the back of that, created the Institute for Sustainable Futures, which is, of course, hosting this conference. I was fortunate to be one of the very first PhD scholars at ISF, and that's my personal connection with these lands right here. So, with that, perhaps I'll just hand over to Marty. We'll have some great discussion with the panellists, and then we'll have about half an hour of discussion, questions and answers from you folks and anyone joining us online, and we'll be wrapped up by 12:15. Over to you, Marty. Thanks so much.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you so much for the warm introduction, Paul. It's truly a pleasure and a privilege to be facilitating this conversation alongside three incredible Pacific leaders today on the practice of everyday leadership. During our discussion, Irene, Luan and Aloisi will share their experience of exercising leadership in different contexts and highlight their own lived realities of everyday leadership from their own unique perspectives. We're united by our respective engagements with the DFAT-funded Australia Awards Women Leading and Influencing program, which we'll call WLI for short throughout this. WLI is an Australia Awards Enrichment Program that supports Pacific women to lead and influence change across the region. It includes an Australian-based or on-award program here in Australia and also enabling support once they return home. WLI's approach is informed by a significant body of research on developmental leadership, which stems from some cross-case analysis of how change happens in different contexts, including in Pacific contexts. Developmental leadership recognises that social change happens when motivated individuals who have incentives, values, interests and opportunity to push for change work collectively to contest ideas, underpinning the status quo and legitimise an alternative set that can promote change. Developmental leaders lead and influence change in multiple and diverse ways, including through leadership within their families and communities, in their professional lives or through formal politics. This approach acknowledges that leadership is not just about the position you hold, but also what you do. And just reflecting on the plenary yesterday and Jackie Adams' comments about how important our actions are. Development is often led by informal leaders and through everyday leadership. This perspective on leadership emphasises the role of everyday agents of change who are committed to improving the lives of their communities and who drive change through day-to-day political processes that involve contesting ideas, forging relationships and navigating complex social norms. WLI supports Pacific leaders via structured professional development that prepare local leaders to work together to pursue positive change. And while the focus of the program is on women, men participate in some of the offerings, and this approach recognises that positive social change requires both men and women, and men and women working together complementary. Irene, Luann and Aloisi all completed WLI-supported Women's Developmental Leadership Program during their Australian-based studies and have accessed WLI's enabling support when they returned home, including a leadership fund, which provides small grants for local leaders to design and deliver small bet projects, like we talked about this morning, trials, projects in their home countries on issues and challenges they identify as important. They will share examples of initiatives they've led in their communities and professional lives that aim to promote positive change. They'll also share what they have learned about leadership from these experiences. Again, as reflected in the plenary this morning, this is an opportunity for deep listening and learning from Pacific leaders. Our aim is to highlight the importance of understanding leadership through an everyday lens and help shift attention towards different ways that individuals and groups can lead efforts for change. Time permitting, we're really excited to also discuss and reflect on how development partners can think about and pursue culturally sensitive change and Pacific-led change. We'd also like to acknowledge our colleague here, Liz Jackson, who helped prepare a lot of the literature on developmental leadership and work with us to prepare this session. So without further ado, and getting to the voices and perspectives you're all here to hear from, my first question is for Luann. You have recently established a first of its kind electronic library in your province of New Ireland in Papua New Guinea. Can you tell us a little bit about the library, what motivated you to start this project?
Yes, thank you, Mardi. We look so fancy on paper, don't we? Yeah. I would also personally like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of this great land, the Gadigal people and of the Eroa Nation. Also acknowledging the elders past and present, and extending that to the Aborigines and the Aboriginals and the Torres Strait Islanders and the Pacific Islanders present here today. And I believe, I know, Paul, you've already acknowledged, but I believe that culture does govern the type of leader that we should become and the type of action that has to be taken by that leader. And acknowledging our culture and the past does shape a lot of that. Yes, so back to the question. Yes, so I went back home. So I'm from Papua New Guinea. I am from an island province called the New Island Province, and my village is situated in the middle of the highway, in the middle of the island. And so I'm from central New Island Province. And although my village is right next to the road, we don't receive the basic government services that we should have. And so I implemented the Ben Isikel e-library project with the assistance of the WLI grant. And coming into that project, I could say now that I was very naive and very ignorant, and I will tell you why later. Because I came in with my inspiration for the project was to fulfill my dad's vision, my late father's vision, to establish a library back in his home village in New Island. They never had a library in the community school. And so my late father realized very early on how limited resources to information and books really challenged how he learned in school. And that didn't create a good learning environment for him. And so he was determined to put a library there. And so I took up that vision and I implemented a library, but I reimagined the vision into having a digital aspect because I had an IT background. And so coming into this project, I decided, okay, let me use the grant and allow me to implement a digital library. Now, infrastructure challenges was the fact that there was no electricity and the school had not enough capacity, financial ability to maintain a consistent internet bill payment, you know? And so I had to look at those two things. So a traditional e-library couldn't work. A conventional one, I mean. And so I had to look at options that were available for my sort of context. And so when I went online, I don't know if most of you heard about it, but it's called a Rachel, remote educational, I forgot. Yeah, it's a hotspot with offloaded, offline content of all the educational materials loaded into that device, and the school can have access to a range of educational materials. And so I thought that, and it was battery operated, so I thought, wow, that's a great solution for the kind of situation that the school is in. And so I ordered the equipment online and also taking into consideration the electricity. And so we had to also purchase a solar power station so that we could power the laptops with the solar power station. But all that aside, the major challenge that I faced was the fact that there were bigger issues in my community that could have been addressed, that I could have looked at instead of putting a digital library. Not to say education wasn't important, but they needed, for example, a spade to go gardening. They needed tools to go fishing. And these were the kind of knowledge that could sustain their livelihood for the day. And so my challenge was working around their schedules. I had to work out a schedule to implement the project that did not disrupt their daily lives. And having said that, it's okay for me to say that, oh, they should have time and all these things, but why would someone go and look at a computer all day and have nothing to eat in the afternoon because he did not go fishing? And so those were the challenges that I faced, and I had to adapt and I had to accommodate the project going into the village. When I went into the village, the upper hand I had was that I had influence because I was from that village. And having influence coming from a matrilineal society, the women had the power over the land, over some leadership skills as well, but men also held leadership roles. And it was up to me to invite the men leaders into the project so that there was inclusivity and people listened to the elders that were the men in the village. and I couldn't deny that. And I had to take them on board and made them feel inclusive so that they took ownership of the project. Anyway, fast forward, we did implement the e-library. It was such a great success 3 months after, and we launched it. At that time, all the government people wanted to be part of it too, as well. Initially, they didn't show interest, but when you launch it, they want to be there. So we launched it, and it was great. The community were very helpful also. But I wanted to also share that it brought a new concept into the community. They didn't know about digital literacy, and they didn't know that it was a need. It was sort of like a futuristic development, something that could happen in the future, that could help them in the future. And they were only looking about how I could survive day to day. And so putting in the e-library, I had to communicate the benefits. I had to really communicate and get them to understand that this is beneficial for you. And so we did that by communicating the benefits. I had to win the trust of not just the students and the teachers, but the mothers of the community that took their children to school as well. I wanted to also just mention here, I won't take up the whole discussion session, but also to mention that when we implemented the e-library, the children were so ecstatic. They were so excited that the very next week, they had 100% attendance rate. Not one child wanted to miss out on school because they were thinking, oh my goodness, if I don't go to school today, I'm going to miss out on using the computer, And that brought so much excitement to enhancing learning in the classroom. But yeah, that's basically.
Thank you, Luann. Aloisi, we've just heard from Luann about, credibility in communities and partnering with people and meeting people where they're at. Can you please tell us about the sustainable farming project in Fiji that you and some other colleagues established during COVID? Can you tell us a little bit about the project and also what inspired you to implement this project?
Thank you, Maddie. I know with the COVID, when COVID hit us, everybody was like in a state of shock. It was unexpected. And Fiji being a country that is so reliant on tourism, the whole tourism industry collapsed. So with the community that we did our work on, it was in the province of Nandrunga. That's where most hotels and resorts are. So most of the people that live around that area, are hotel industry workers. So most of them lost their jobs during COVID. And that created a lot of social problems in the communities. So when WLI was, letting us know as alumni that there is grant available that we could apply for. So there were two other colleagues of mine. We sat together from a very diverse background. I come from the agriculture space, particularly in plant pathology. Not that I've worked directly or been an employee of the Ministry of Agriculture, but my career has been around, I work with NGOs, but we collaborate very closely with the Ministry of Agriculture. So I was coming from that background. And then my two other colleagues, one from the fisheries, and the other one was from the Ministry of Health. So we thought that, okay, if we're going to sit down and think about, tease out how we're going to put together a proposal to WLI. So we did some scope study across the communities around. Mind you, these two ladies, they are from the province, but I'm not. So we decided that we'll try and visit some communities around the area. They thought of their own communities, but that would be a conflict of interest. So we thought of, running in a very different community. And that's how we came about designing the project that we had run, that WLI had funded. So it was more to work with women empowerment. Now, this was a very sensitive issue, when we come to talk about the Pacifica, or if you want to talk about the Fijian indigenous community. We had to tread very carefully in this space because we didn't want to be seen as disruptors of culture, I may say. So what we did was, if we were going to work on just agriculture, that will be a bit biased. If we work on fishery, it's going to be still biased. So we decided to do an integrated project. And that was the community that we worked with. They had, when we did our scope study, sometimes, with the community, and we've heard a lot of that in the last few sessions, when aid or projects come in, the first thing they will talk about is what they lack, the deficit. And then, they don't tend to realize how much they have, the strengths they have. So we worked on that angle, looking at it on a very strength-based approach. They already have an existing tilapia pond, which has been idle for years. And having the expertise from the fisheries on board with us on the project team, we were able to build up on that. And I was coming in on my agriculture side. So we thought we will do an integrated broiler and tilapia farming. So the broiler, the pond was dressed. And then on top of the pond, we built the broiler shed. So in other words, we were trying to empower women that though that they had lost their job, they still can generate some income from the assets they've already got in the community. So we saw the broiler production as like a short term because it takes only 6 weeks. And then we've got the tilapia, which takes about 3 to 4 months. That would be their long term. Now, this wasn't an easy thing to do. It sounds so easy as I'm talking about it, but during the journey, in trying to implement the project from the onset, wasn't easy. However, there were lessons learned along the way, and that to me was more important than the outcome of the project. One of the things we've learned throughout this project implementation was, I personally, was to be adaptive in the way we implement projects in the community. We work with their timing, and that's what we did. Now, in the Fijian community or in indigenous community or village community, they have, we are so into our communal way of life, and we call that the Sole Solevaki. So the Sole Solevaki Day is where people come together in the community. They do work together. It's a time where the whole community comes together, to do a common thing that is planned out for the week. And always their day of doing this is Monday. And that was the day we chose to work with them so that we don't come in with an added on activity, but something that is already embedded into their work. And that's how we approach that. We try to be adaptive and very flexible in our timing. And most importantly, patience. I'm not a person of patience. I was a high school teacher before I joined the research organization. So one of the virtues of being a teacher is patience, and that I didn't have. That's why I resigned. But there were lessons along the way that had helped me in the work that we do on a daily basis, as in this project. Besides the actual work that I do. that is putting food on the table at home. So the other thing was we had to be very culture sensitive. We are not coming in with what we think that the community needs, but we are working together with them, with their needs. And at the end of the day, that will also ensure sustainability because they take ownership of it, involve them from the beginning. And that's what we did. During the consultation, during the inception of the project, we had them together. So it was co-designing and co-planning with the community. But co-designing and co-planning might have some other negative connotation to it, which probably we can touch on later on. So they feel ownership of the whole thing. And that helped us to get the project activities or the project activities implemented. But on the utmost, we had to build trust with them. Trust is not something that is built overnight. It's something that gradually builds up as we proceed on with it. Now, bear in mind that I'm from another province. I don't speak their dialect, though I'm married into that province. I don't speak their dialect. The two ladies, the two other WLI alumni who were with me, they're from that province, but they are not from the community. So all the three of us were kind of foreigners, into that community. So what really helped though was these two ladies, they speak their dialect. So they were able to translate it into their dialect because I'll be speaking the normal Fijian language, which everybody speaks. And that would be a struggle to this community. So we had the two, so it was more like a win-win. And then we've got the most important thing also that we have learned through this project is building partnerships, building relationships through partnerships. And we had in mind was sustainability. This was one of a kind for the province. No other villages in the province has had that kind of model of farming. So it was more like our pilot community as well. And we've got, what we did, we roped in the Ministry of Agriculture, we roped in the Ministry of Women, we roped in the Ministry of Fisheries. Because, as you know, projects have timelines and have durations where they will have to exit. So we had this ministry, these government sectors, and they are very important when we are implementing projects in communities, to have them on board, because they'll be the one that will take over this project and work with your community. But one thing I've also learned is they cannot just come in at the end, but you've got to involve them from the beginning. Because if you want to bring them at the end when you are exiting, then you won't be able to see the outcome, the great outcome of this. So that is the most important thing for me. The challenges were there, but the most important thing for me was the lessons learned along the way. And that can be very rewarding. It's not so much the outcomes of the project, but the relationship you have built along the way, the people that you have worked with, and the changes that you have worked together with the community with to be able to ensure improvement in their livelihood. Thank you.
Anaka Aloisi. Irene, can you share with us a little bit about your leadership experience through implementing the projects?
Thanks, Madi. Thank you for having us here. I would say as an Australian Awards scholar, while I was doing my PhD in UQ, I was very fortunate to be part of WLI and to access the leadership funds, just like Luen and Aloisi here. And there have been a number of projects that I have kind of like implemented and designed and that. So I'll just pick from one of these projects. So just like Aloisi, during COVID-19, we were given the chance to think of like COVID-19 projects within the like health space. So I have a public health background. My research has been in public health, but I've looked specifically at indigenous methodologies grounding Melanesian ways of knowing, doing, and being. So one of these projects was to do with health workers in New Ireland province. That's where Luen comes from. And it was difficult at first because we had to, like, from thinking about the design of the project, I was here in Australia, and my fellow WLI alumni in country in Papua New Guinea were they scholar. She was the one that was based in New Ireland. She's a health worker, radiographer there at the hospital. So we were thinking about how we could like kind of capacity build for health workers. So going back to the issue of COVID-19, so any health facility, anyone who works in health knows that the wash infrastructure, water, taps, tanks, they need to be functional for health workers to do what they need to do. And the taps were just, there was broken taps, tanks not functional. So the initial plan was to like write for funding to like install tanks and to improve the infrastructure. Now we tossed and turned and we thought, in the long run, this is not sustainable knowing our environment. It's normal for taps, for any type of water infrastructure to break down given the environment. This is a tropical country, rust, etc. So we thought, why not empower health workers through capacity building, through training them in project management and grant writing. So that was our project in New Ireland. Scholar did all the heavy lifting because the borders were shut and I was based here in Australia. I could only provide moral support. She was able to lead this project with, I think there were 12 health managers, of which 8 or so of them were women. And we managed to get someone in New Ireland who was able to run the sessions for the health workers in project management and grant writing. And these health workers were from Namatanai district, one of the 2 districts in New Ireland. And through the project, we were able to also patronize the local economy there through boat operators, for participants to travel in, for guest houses, thinking about all these things, radio communications. Like the moment in which the project was going to be carried out, of course, like Luen has mentioned, as Aloisi has mentioned, you need to gauge that understanding for why this particular activity is important. So through word of mouth, through radio, we were able to talk to different health managers that it's important for you to gain project management and grant writing skills so that you can have these skills for your own needs. You can assess your own needs for your health facility and seek further funding for it. Long story short, 2 years ago, one of the health facilities that's predominantly, pardon the word, they're more focused on TB control, was able to write for a grant to renovate and upgrade their health center in Namatanai. So I guess it comes back to balancing those needs in terms of the project, but thinking of the long term and what's sustainable. The other issue that Scholar also found, like Aloisi, it's similar to Aloisi, we're all outsiders. None of us were from New Ireland, but because Scholar had existing relationships with the provincial health authority there, she was able to gauge that support and sustenance of the project through her networks. That was really important for her to continue. Now, coming back to the province and the government, the provincial government. They found out that the project was held in Namatanai, which is not the provincial capital. And they were like, how could they bypass us in Kavieng? Kavieng's the capital of New Ireland. And they're like, how could they bypass us? You need to carry out one of these projects here. So the following year, Scholar and I were able to put in a proposal to get a grant for Kavieng. But just backtracking a bit, when the training session had finished and the participants, the health workers, were given their certificates of participation and attendance of this training, I was like, yes, bring in all the district administrator, health administrator to come on board and give them the certificates. We need that support. And no wonder why they kicked up a big fuss. You need to bring it back to the capital. And the same thing happened there. So I guess starting out a project in a way, initially, and I'm not to say that this is not the case everywhere in Papua New Guinea, they don't initially see the importance or that aspiration. But once it's done, you suddenly get all this buzz and noise that, yeah, I need to be there to say that I supported this. So it kind of helps in another way to say, yeah, okay, you can put your name to it, or you can be there to shake hands and give out the certificates. And that prolonged the support for the next project that happened in Kavieng. Yep.
Thank you, Irene. A question for all of the panel members. Who or what do you think has helped you in your leadership journeys?
Yeah, just push me into the spot. Well, of course, the WLI team and the coaching and the training and the grant has helped me in the project. Also, the community, and also the support systems that are already in existence, like my family, my husband, and having their support also helped me in the project. I wanted to also bring up here, I hope I'm not, well, it's a platform for provoking discussion, okay? So Liz, don't kill me up here. But I think it's a platform where DFAT also can see and hear us, the implementers, that in the WLI program, what do you see leadership as? And is it the westernized sort of like idea of leadership, or is it the Pacific leadership view? And essentializing gender, I'm very careful on saying that, but we are not equal. We come from different identities, cultures. We have different roles, gender roles as well. And also your perception of gender roles is very different from ours. Our gender roles, we complement our men. And we are, I mean, that's my personal perception. I complement my husband, and where he lacks, I come in. And that's not minimizing my role as a woman of empowerment and in coming out to the community. And so getting that extra support from my husband and from my community and the culture that's already set there played a very important part of me implementing the project. And when I went in, it was okay to sit at the back, you know, and let the people in front go ahead and do the project. It was okay to sit at the back and have them communicate the benefits to the community, because that got the work done. And that was the point of everything. And, you know, the only difficult task that was posed in front of me pushing out my project, I had everything done. The WLI grant application had all the checklists for me to have a sustainable project. The digital library had a digital committee that I left behind to carry out the interests of the committee and pose anything that they lacked to put forward into the school board. I also had the interests of the community themselves looking after the project. But having said that, how was I seen in the community? As my other leaders also mentioned, we were foreigners, even though we were locals. And that wasn't taught to us by WLI. How do we manage those issues that dispute or go against the cultural norms? How do I handle by not being alienated from my own culture? And I think that was something that I had to find my step. And that was the adaptive learning that we were finding ourselves trying to learn from. And the tools that WLI did equip us to, at some extent, to work it out. But yeah, I hope I didn't confuse all of you here. But the learning that I gained from the project was really adaptive. And you can only discover it when you're on ground and you actually do the project. And well, the project was very successful, the digital library that I implemented. They 1 year after the implementation, so after 2023, 1 year after, we never had more than 9 people graduating and passing into grade 9. The national exams were at grade 8. After the implementation of the e-library, the students were able to learn more. And so a record-breaking 12 students passed on to grade 9, which was really great. Yeah. But what I learned also from there was that the product that I put in the village were all African educational materials for African people. So I had to customize a lot of things on it. I had to put in the PNG teacher curriculum, just loaded it on it, and I had to put the grade 8 national exams, loaded it on it. So I had to really do a lot of things in that space, but yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Muddy. I'll try and stick to the question. But thank you, Luann, for bringing up some of the issues, which I believe through this forum we'll be able to deliberate more and probably tease more, and probably would result in a call of action in the end. For me, there's been a number of individuals who has really shaped. I tried my best not to be emotional. My leadership skills. One of them is my parents. They were the ones who instilled humility and spiritual values in me. And of course, WLI. The leadership skills were embedded already in there, but they tapped those skills during all our sessions. And I'm so grateful to WLI and also to DFED for giving us this opportunity to be able to shine and come out very strongly as we are now. So we are indeed grateful to WLI for that opportunity, and not forgetting the leaders who had been mentoring me along the way, in all my career path. So I pay so much respect for them, along the way that had shaped the kind of leader I am today. So I was learning through examples from those mentors. And what had actually shaped my leadership now is, most importantly, my faith that has kept me grounded. And my reliance on God has really kept me grounded and had worked through challenges along the way. You know, I mentioned that I didn't have patience, but I've grown to have some patience in me to be able to work through challenges. And that has helped me to, you know, to coexist with some people that may be difficult to work with. Yes, and I pay respect and tribute to those people who had really shaped, that I had mentioned, that had really shaped the kind of leader I am today. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess as emerging as a leader, I do concur with what Luen and Essie have mentioned already. It comes from, well, I think something's on. Yeah, from family, to my late father, who was a strong supporter of educating women and saw the value in my mother's education, my own education to get this far, and that power of influence. At the same time, going back to WLI, the coaching sessions have been like tremendously helpful for me as an academic now here in Australia, and back home in Papua New Guinea. I was working as an academic there. Being able to just have debriefings about navigating the power dynamics within these contexts was so important. When I think of the academic universities and the type of structures that universities have, that was important. But going different levels as well, looking at when you have actors or stakeholders as government at that level to the community levels, to the villages and that. How do you work with people? How do you manage expectations? All these things, even though I learned it through my experience working alongside other WLI alumni and my own colleagues and other people in the network, the coaching sessions did a lot to unpack so much of which sometimes we can be blinded to. Yeah.
Thank you, Irene. We want to make sure we have a lot of time for questions and answers. So I'm just quickly going to reflect and sum up some of the thoughts the panel has shared today. So we've talked about the term local and how that has many different meanings and many different layers. We've talked about working with the strengths of culture and the importance and power of speaking to people in their own language. We've talked about the complexities of navigating cultural, political, social norms at different levels of communities. The importance of strengths-based approaches and working with what already exists in the context. The value of adaptive approaches in our leadership. Involving and working with the community in co-design and co-planning to embed and sustain our efforts. The role of faith, family and community and learning in our leadership journeys. The value of embedding in local systems. So Irene's example, I think that long-term sustainability and also in LOSEs. And the last one that I'll leave with before we start the questions is just the relational approaches take time, and trust in relationships and building that trust with communities also takes time, which often isn't permitted in kind of the short-term cycles of projects. So thank you so much to our panel for sharing their experiences. And now we'll open it up to questions. So I think everyone by now understands and has a grasp on the app. So we have, with the wonderful help of Paul, he will have a microphone roving in the room. So if you have a question, we can ask it live in person. or you can submit it via the app.
First of all, how about we just give this wonderful panel a clap for that fantastic discussion. Yeah, thanks so much for sharing those insights and the role that leaders can play in creating some real change in people's lives. In case if there's any questions from the field, from the floor, we can take those perhaps just to get the ball rolling. There's some in the app already. What were the biggest unexpected challenges you faced and how did you overcome them?
Does anyone want to tackle that one?
Thank you. For me, one of the biggest challenges we faced, and that's very common in any project that we implement, there are the risk takers in the community. There are those that are bystanders, just wanting to see if this works. And there are others, no, we don't have anything to do with that project at all. Now, the most important thing with us was try to work with those that are interested and, work along with them on, with us, the most important thing was, there was a lot coming out to play in the community during that COVID time. So we were trying to use our expertise coming from those different and very diverse group that we had. So that we were trying to actually implement the project with those that are interested. And then, so they were like your champions in this case. They totally understand what we were trying to do, what we were trying to help, what change we were trying to bring in. We were not really imposing any change, but something that was already existing in there that they can capitalize on to be able to improve their livelihood, because their livelihood was just was cut off, from the COVID, or due to COVID, when the hotel industry was closed. So we started off with those that were interested, and then along the way, as we progressed with the project, then the bystanders, seeing is believing, and that's when they started to come in. And one good thing about this project, I must say, it brought together the community, not only the women, but we also had the men folks in the end. They were all, it brought unity amongst them. And at the same time, there was a lot of sharing, knowledge sharing. And one thing that we found out was, as they were feeding the fish, the tilapia, or even feeding the broiler birds, it wasn't just about feeding those living organisms, but a lot was taking place during that time. The women were, they used up that space to share what they were going through. So that was very powerful. It created that space where they could, it wasn't about feeding the fish. It wasn't just about feeding the broiler birds, but there was more things, more discussions taking place around them. Yeah, that's how we managed to overcome that challenge.
Thank you, Essie. Does anyone else want to comment or
Yeah,
challenge?
one shocking challenge that I didn't think was a challenge was the fact that they didn't need the library. And I thought it was something they needed. And so I went in with, yes, I got a great solution. And then I went in and like, no, we don't need that. And so I guess understanding the needs of the community, the thing that we always talk about, but really understanding what they really need. So if I were to learn from the experience, my solution would have probably been to create an access to digital technology, create a platform that enabled digital access to enhance the livelihood of people in the village. So I could have put the e-library to help them build toilets or build fishing gear or build gardening tools or something like that, you know. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so did anyone want to ask a question in the room before we go to the next question on the app? Okay. Oh, wait, there is someone right up the back. Thank you, Paul.
I'll actually do double duty by asking one from on the chat and then adding to it. So Mariana on the chat has said, what would you say was the most valuable or transformative component of the WLI program and why? And can I just add to that, did you have an opportunity to feed back to the WLI program your own ideas to transform it? So just the nature of the two-way transformation exchange.
Thank you.
Sorry, I'm going to have to ask the first question again. Sorry, if you can just...
So the one on the app was, what was the most valuable or transformative aspect of participating in WLI? And then, if I'm correct, have you had an opportunity to feed back and transform the WLI experience?
Sure. For me personally, it's that I could be a leader. I've always known it growing up that, yes, I can do this, but being able to, knowing that Papua New Guinea is resource limited, that I could reach into other, like it was this expanse, like a hub of people, knowledge, knowledge frameworks that I could tap into to enhance my leadership journey in whatever fields and whatever projects that I undertook. For example, another project that I did was to host and coordinate a women's leadership forum for women parliamentarians in Papua New Guinea. I have no politics background. I don't know why I thought of doing that, but it was a great success, bringing so many people together for that event. And I learned so much through it, just by engaging with different people, with different sets of ideas, with skill sets that I don't have, that I could work alongside. It was challenging, but one of the things that I took back from it was one of the feedback from the feedback that we got from that particular forum from one of my colleagues higher up in the organization was that, oh, but it didn't reach community leaders at the roots level because it was more focused in like urban PNG. And of course, I thought to myself, yeah, try running this, like try organizing this within 4 months with the type of help that you can get within that time. But at the same time too, it made me realize that in the development space or this space that we're dealing in, not necessarily everyone will benefit from your idea or your project. That's just it. And I had to like reconcile that and say, that's okay. It's good. Get the feedback, learn from it, and you can pass it on to somebody else who can be able to carry that out. Now, going to the lessons, like giving our feedback to WLI for ways forward, it goes in line with yesterday's plenary session on decolonizing. Decolonizing is the framework in which I would like to see WLI think about. Our stories here already show that the social cultural context is just so important when we think about the type of projects or activities or leadership activities that we want to implement. And we want to bring people along, but these people are rooted within their Melanesian or their Pacifica way of knowing, doing, and being. without that social cultural context embedded into the program's design of leadership in the future, I don't know how well it will be effective. So I think, yes, when we're thinking about our leadership, like, for example, the change that we, not the change, but when we first started in WLI, and this is taking it with, please take this as a way of like building upon to make better, that we first started off with really core capital P concepts of politics. And many of us were very reluctant because we didn't think that we don't really want to be involved in capital P politics. Yes, we can manage the day-to-day small p politics and power dynamics that happen in our organizations. That's enough for us at the moment. But let us, as Pacifica people, we like to hear the concept, okay, but we want to see it. What's the tangible like experience of it? So us being in that space, in that context, in our communities, doing leadership helped us to say, so this is what we have done, this is what we know, this is what can be learned from it. And we have found that relationships, relationality is a big thing in the Pacific, not just between people, but people to the animals, to the environment, to water, sea, and the spiritual. Those are important things that we need to consider in terms of women's leadership. Another thing is the complementarity of men and women in our communities. We still need men to champion our projects, even if sometimes it means taking that soft or back seat that is not really kind of like regarded so much in the Western context. Some women are okay with that. Some women want to be in the front, and that's okay too. There's nothing wrong with that. But at the same time, by using culture, our Melanesian Pacifica culture as a tool, can bring about issues of which women are making decisions at the table, like we have shown in our projects as well. So I think moving forward, decolonizing, having Pacifica women too in that space to think about the leadership program moving forward. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Luan?
can I make a comment as well? Yeah, so coming back to how DFAT sees what Pacific leadership looks like. And you know, the WLI program has built us as elites in leadership, but of the Western culture, of your systems. And what about our systems? And we have been leading also in our communities. What about the ones that are not educated? They're champions, they're in the village that in Western culture is illiterate. When back home, it's not illiterate. It's the way of knowing the land and how to do it. And they do it very, how did I say it? They do it very efficiently. And so taking that into consideration, and I think we've done some discussions with WLI, but this RDI network has really opened up our perspective on looking at it in a very open kind of way, and it's really great to be a part of it. And that's the kind of discussions now that we want to have with WLI programs, and that we want to be a part of, as my colleague here mentioned before we came in, part of co-designing the Pacific leadership for women in the Pacific. And so that we bring in that cultural aspect and that cultural leadership, you know. And from where we come from, women leadership in certain roles are us being at home washing the clothes, us being at home cooking. And that's something we want to do. And we don't see it as, hey, that's not equal, you're not washing the clothes. No. If this is my part to enable a more happy family, then I will be happy to do it. It's not about the sort of like gender role challenges that we are getting all hyped about. But yes, having that context. And I think we should have more discussions with WLI program about, and especially with DFAT, you know, creating such programs at WLI to look at this in co-designing, as my friend said, to look at involving us in the beginning, men and women, to create such programs. Yeah.
Thank you, Luan. On a related question, I think we've covered some points that the panel would share with donors and managing contractors. What would your advice be to funders like DFAT to improve support for everyday leaders across the Pacific like yourselves? I might start with you, Aloisi, if that's okay.
Thanks, Madi. I think as Luan had already mentioned, when we talk about co-designing and co-planning with funders, from my perspective, we would really need to be very careful when we talk about co-designing and co-planning with our funders. We can have a seat at the table, and then we talk about what really our needs are as specific women or as specific people. That, in a way, can be very challenging along the way to make sure that our funder doesn't go back to default along the way. So it's something that, you know, boggles my mind. Though I've been talking about co-designing and co-planning, how would that look like when we are all seated at the table coming in and you know, coming from a very science and a very linear way of doing research, as in the science. Now, going back to the previous question that we had, was the transformation that has taken place, or the transformative development. Like, we're so used to working in silos, and there is a great need for us to break those silos and allow for other, you know, other disciplines to come in, because the challenges or the issues there are in the community, there has to be concerted efforts. So in this sense, this is where our donor in this case would be DFAT, to look at us as partners as well, not just as implementers of their program, but to look at us as partners. And as partners, we all have a seat at the table. So we may not be able to address every interest of those that are seated at the table, but let's come to a consensus as to what would work better and what we can do together to enhance, you know, development in, you know, out in the community in the Pacific.
Fantastic. Thank you. And echoing the words of Dame Meg this morning of that consensus between partners. Luan?
Yeah, can I butt in? I know you guys are sick of hearing me. But also the donors understanding that the donors understanding that it's not about the grant and it's not about the grant and the money that you put into it. It's about the inspiration. And what has inspired that concept of that project and that vision? It's about the inspiration. And so when I get that inspiration of the e-library and I put it in the village, it's not like a one solution for all, not like a solar solution for all to power light. There's some villages can have use wave energy because they have waves, but it's about using that example and putting it in their context and how it will help them. So if the donors see it from that context, I think there can be more partnership and more rich, full kind of assistance or yeah, whatever you can say.
Thank you. We've got a question down the front from Joel.
Thank you so much for your inspirational sharing of your experiences. I know that you've talked about the co-designing, managing that. Just, I would like, my question is basically if you could share your experiences, given that you are implementers on the ground and you're managing the expectations of WLI, DT Global DFAT, whilst at the same time, the expectations of the community that you're working in. How do you manage those stuff? Thank you. Playing that brokering role, you have that, and then the needs from the ground and the agenda from above and the agenda from the ground.
Vanaka Josiah. Yeah, so managing the different expectations of many different people. So maybe Irene, could we start with you? Would that be okay?
Yeah, it's, I think, case by case too, based on like who you're working with. I mean, that's been my experience. And many a times I've had to lean on people more experienced than me, say for the women's forum on like the parliamentarians. There was a lot to do with protocol. And I was so new to that. So those that were so well versed in doing protocol work, yeah, they were, delegated to them. They are the ones that could manage that from that perspective. I've worked with communities in Papua New Guinea doing research. They have their own interests and needs. Just it goes along the lines of what Luen was saying. But I guess it's coming to a common shared interest where that's met, and then saying how much they can put in, how much of an investment of their time, their resources, whatever it is that is needed for them to be a part of the project. But at the same time too, yeah, I guess it's the common goals that are seen through from the top all the way down, but laterally as well with your partners and trying to bring that all into play. It kind of brings me back to this question of, sorry if I'm going away, my brother, that about like what do we need to say to the donor and for WLA moving forward. And I really liked the session we attended just previously, and we're lucky to have one of the speakers here with us. Thank you so much. Where she spoke about like risk, taking that risk. I think moving forward, we need to take that risk with a lot of the type of projects that we are going to implement if we want change to happen. And a lot of it, like I said, is social cultural. That expectation and that trust, building those relationships. They're so important. But then it asks the question again, like, is it a risk? How do I manage that risk? Again, if we see to it that way. And I feel that if we do have those conversations around the risk of that, managing the risk, because if you think about my project to do with the capacity building of health workers, we were thinking about it in terms of risk aversion, to be honest. So if we think about the risk, I think we can seem to build on, think in the long run in terms of transformative or transformation and change. Yeah.
Thank you, Irene. Did either of you want to talk about managing the expectations of community and then donors?
But I want to talk too much, Okay, you can talk after me. For me personally, it's a spiritual thing. For me, it's my God. He has allowed me, and especially I believe that God has created women to be fluid like water, to take up the space of the thing that it needs to take up and to fill up where it needs to fill up, to be enough and to be adequate and to be strong, and also managing the different caps that we wear. And it's not just managing DFAT and WLI, who's played a very great role in shaping us, but also managing my life as a wife, as a mother, managing the aspect of my professional life. So what I usually do is when I'm at the office, I put my cap for the manager on. When I come home, I take it off at the office. I come home, I put my mother cap on and my wife cap on. So it's just putting which cap on at that particular time. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, I've got a question down.
This has been an excellent panel. Thank you so much. My question is around when we're talking about women leadership in a sense of like having women as leaders, right? But what I'd like us to maybe the panelists touch a bit on is bringing out the feminine energy into leadership exercise, which goes beyond women or men, but kind of bringing that openness for collaboration, openness to listen, and everything, the fluidity of femininity across, women and men, because some might point to one of the root causes of many of the ongoing violence in the world, wars, and the fact that we haven't addressed climate change by far has a lot to do with this masculine kind of defensive, energy, protecting your own only instead of opening up to potential solutions. So I don't know if any of you want to touch on that. Like, how do we bring more of those feminine energy, regardless of like actual gender of the person, into leadership, into world leadership? Thanks.
Thank you. Does anyone want to?
I like that. I'm a very soft-spoken person. Like I said, I didn't think so much. Like I always thought the traditional notion of leadership is, being outspoken and being confident and being out there. I think Jacinda Ardern says it really well that, I don't want to be that strong, outspoken. I can be that person that has empathy and compassion. And many Pacifica women embody that. They are that. They're very quiet. They can seem very subdued. I'm kind of like that myself. And I think it has, the positive to that is it has promoted a lot of respect in our communities for the men that we have worked. I've had so much support from male colleagues because of that, because I've allowed them to step up in a space where I should be stepping up and standing out, but they have, and they've been happy that, they talk, it goes in line with the academic from Laos, the visiting fellow that mentioned this morning about let them speak your merits. That's happened to me, where I've created that influence in another way. It's a very soft form of leadership, where they have spoken about it. They continue to talk about it, that, oh, I was the one that did the Women's Forum, or we were the ones that did this capacity building for health workers. We weren't really right out there in the front. We were the ones leading from behind. And that focuses a lot to that femininity, that feminine energy that is still very much needed. It is really needed in our communities. Men in our communities will refer back to their mothers for that emotional support. They keep going back to that. They always will trust a woman or a mother who has that sort of warmth and embrace, who can always give them that courage and that wisdom, that living wisdom to still continue their daily lives too. So I do believe in that as well, bringing that forward instead of always having that strong, maybe that trying to be masculine, which, I mean, for myself, I couldn't be, but that's me.
Thank you, Irene. I also echo the same sentiment. Running projects in the community where, especially in the Fijian indigenous community, can be very daunting for a woman to come in and work with the people in the community. especially one, you are not from that community, that's for one. And also being a woman coming in. But as we had run through the projects, you know, it's very important that it's something that how we women are wired. It's just that soft skills that come into play most of the time when we are dealing with conflicts. And this was one of the things that I had brought up in our discussion, previous discussion prior to coming into this room, that, you know, WLI, probably this is a conversation we were going to have with WLI. We didn't have any much of the training in conflict, you know, how you manage conflict. But that's already, you know, even though it wasn't part of the curriculum with WLI, but it was something that was already embedded in our lives as women. We were able to, you know, to manage some of the conflicts that arise. That was just because of, you know, the empathy that we have and trying to resolve conflicts amongst our people, our very own people, though we call them our people, but we were like outsiders to them. And that has gained a lot of trust, you know, for the community, and that enabled us to implement the project successfully. So it's very important that our femininity trait kind of come out very strongly when we are running projects like this. And yes, I totally agree. It has to show. And I concur with what Irene had said, that for us to be heard, we don't have to be strong in our voice to come out very strongly and speak over people, thinking that that's you know, we're gaining some power. But I would see that as insecurity. So yeah, soft skills are pretty much very important as well in leadership. Thank you.
Yeah, I have something to comment. You know, it's a very tricky question for you guys, not for us, because in the Pacific Islands, female and femininity and female is having female organs. And so you guys are confused because you have this. So we won't go into that. But having said that, it's not about feminism or is it about, you know, pushing the women to the front. It's about complementing each other. I can complement my women counterpart as well, working together with each other. That's more important, I guess. Yeah. And also knowing where my limits are. Sorry, Irene. So knowing where I can stop and allowing for someone else. Yeah, I know I sound ironic. So I know that I stop here. So, but knowing where I stop and where you come in. Yes.
On? Oh yeah. Just to add on, like having that feminine approach, I won't go on too long, is also being assertive at the same time. It's not saying that I don't have a voice, just to add that too.
Thank you so much. We've got a couple more minutes, so maybe just one more question. There's one in the room. So I think this is more of a Pacific way of talking to each other than.
Hello, Okeda. Mihama mas lo lukimyu, Msblomilo Pacific. My name is Lisa. I'm a PhD student at ISF, but I'm also work with an Aboriginal organisation, and I've loved this conversation, and I'm trying to form words eloquently, but they're not really coming. But I think a lot of what we're talking about is just leadership, but place-based leadership, and that even talking about feminine leadership, I'm thinking, isn't place-based leadership and how you guys are expressing this just authentic leadership in your place? And I think, you know, we're still in this dominant paradigm, and the conference is in Australia, and, you know, we're talking about countries that have all been colonised except for Tonga and Thailand. And my frustration with the development sector, with the settler colonial sector, is that we've still got the dominant paradigm, and we're tinkering a little bit around, you know, that, and how do we just actually back off and support Indigenous-led approaches. What you guys are talking about, like even when you talk about soft power, I'm like, but isn't that just power? You know, like let's, as all the other universities and researchers in the room, how do we just back off a little bit and direct finance directly because I think we're all breathing the same air. We're all suffering from global warming, and Indigenous solutions, Indigenous leadership still exists. It's here on this country. How do we support more of that?
Thank you. We've got like 2 minutes, so maybe I'll invite a quick response and then we can continue some of these discussions into the lunch break, if that's okay. Would anyone like to?
I would go with what Jackie Adams said yesterday, accountable allyship, because I see the aid structure is very rigid and it pays for having allies already pushing back against, like in my mind too, I think, how can you disrupt, as someone who comes from a country, who's part of a country, who has been a recipient all this time and schooled a certain way to unlearn all of that as well. So we need a bridge. Basically, we need a bridge to aid to pushing back on what aid is doing at the moment. Yeah.
Thank you for your question. I think one of the most important things that we had been talking about and we've heard a lot about is, forming alliance. But then the question we pose is, who are the alliance? Who are our allies? That's one thing. And then trying to, to see if the funder backs off or stands behind the scene, and then allowing the implementers of the of the innovations in our respective countries, and it has to be built along trust. There has to be trust, built between the people and the donor in this way, because if we don't have that trust, then we will always have the funder dictating to us what needs to be done. That's my viewpoint.
Okay. I'd just like to say thank you to the incredible Pacific leaders up here who, if we're reflecting back yesterday, who took the courage to come to share their insights, to share their experiences. Also to everyone in the room, thank you for your curiosity and your interest in asking the questions. Thank you to Paul. Thank you to our IT support. I think, can you please join me in giving the panel a huge round of applause?